Hi, and welcome to Music Calgary's Sound Off Summit Back on Track series. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 nations in southern Alberta and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the panel.
So welcome everybody to the Cultivating the Artistic Story panel. This is part of Music Calgary Sound Off Summit's Back on Track panel series. Today, we're going to be discussing with Paul and Yasmin, who I will introduce shortly, how artists can pull elements from their day-to-day life to create compelling stories to share with press and fans, and why storytelling is an important part of the music marketing and branding process of developing a career. So let me introduce our panelists today. Yasmin Shemesh is a freelance music journalist living in Vancouver. Her interviews and essays have been featured in Billboard, MTV, Elle Canada, the Grammys, Exclaim, and many more publications. Which publications are left after that list? She is a juror at the Polaris Music Prize and served on the grand jury in 2021. She was also the city editor at Beetroot magazine in Vancouver from 2015 to 2020. Paul Brooks is a community leader with over 15 years of experience producing, curating, and promoting diverse music and cultural experience for leading brands, including Canada's National Music Centre. Is this Bass Coast or Bass Coast? How do they pronounce it?
Bass Coast.
Bass Coast Festival. I guess if it was Bass Coast, it'd be fishing. And the Sled Island Music and Arts Festival. Paul currently works with TakeAim Media, an industry-leading media relations firm, where he serves a diverse roster of Canadian and international labels and artists whose talents cover the entire musical spectrum, including Bond Sound, Mint Records, Ninja Tune, Domino Records, and many more. Those are some very cool labels, so I'm sure you have a lot of experience and expertise to bring to this discussion, as does Yasmin. I'm excited to get into this discussion. We shared some questions earlier. We're going to kind of dive into those, and we'll just see where the discussion takes us. But hopefully people will find this really helpful and learn something from it, take something from it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you both. So in short, Paul, you're a publicist or a media marketing specialist of sorts. And Yasmin, you are a journalist. So you guys are, I don't know if you guys knew each other before this panel began, but theoretically you would be in dialogue with one another in the process of doing your jobs. So I wanted to kind of start by asking the both of you, what do you look for, Paul, when you are taking on a new client label or a new client artist? Yasmin, what do you look for in terms of when you're evaluating which artists and which records to cover in your freelance journalism life? And either one of you can start. I won't pick names here. Maybe Paul, why don't you start, because you're kind of the start of the process.
Sure. Well, I do send emails to Yasmin, but I don't know if we've ever formally met. So
I'm gonna apologize for being really bad at responding, by the way. So I'm really sorry. I'm awful at it. I get overwhelmed.
As a publicist, I mean, most emails go without responses, so it's okay.
I appreciate
but I was really happy to see you were part of this panel, because now you can't dodge my emails. No, so and also I just want to add that I was a section editor at Beetroot in Calgary way back in the day, so we have that in common. And I have a journalism degree, but I work in the dark arts of PR now, so it's similar, but maybe different ends of the system. So the question was, what do I look for when choosing which projects to engage with? And
yeah, in terms of taking on new clients from, I guess you have labels and individual artists as clients. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I started working with Kim at TakeAim in 2021, and TakeAim Media is very well established and comes with a lot of really incredible clients and an excellent reputation. So, Kim, I've inherited a lot of these relationships and taken over some of Kim's longer standing relationships. So I want to acknowledge that I'm standing on the shoulders of a giant, and Kim is amazing.
Yeah.
So, and you've probably engaged with Kim, in the past, Yasmin. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's awesome.
so Kim's, reputation brings a lot of really interesting people to the agency, and so I'm very, very privileged at the folks that we get to decide to work with. Um, but I mean, when I'm looking for projects to work on, I think I want it to be something that I am personally interested in, because then it's going to be fun to work on, and it's going to be easier to represent the project in an authentic way. So I think, that's really for me the most important part. If I can be choosy, that's number one for me.
Is it before I let you go on that, is it the music that you have to be loving, or is it more than that? Is it a package, or is it a thing where you're like, I love the music, there's not much of a uh, anything around it that I can sell in terms of the PR pitch of it all.
Mm.
But that's where my expertise comes in, or does it have to be more of a complete
I,
package where you would consider taking it on?
so most of the clients that I do work with are on retainers. So like, clients like Bon Sound, I get to work on all of their projects. So if it's an
Mm-hmm.
independent client coming in, um, you know, the I want to meet this person and at least have a video call with them,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as listen to their music and take in the whole package. I wouldn't take on a project just based on the music personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that would be, I mean, it could be risky, and I want to meet the personality, and I want to make sure that the person understands what it is a publicist does, what we can do for you, and what we can't do, which you're not going to be able to tell just based on the music. So I think that's a really important part of it too, is managing expectations about what's going to happen when you engage the services of a publicist.
Great. I want to come back to that, what it is you guys exactly do in terms of the services that TakeAim offers, but I want to jump to Yasmin. And what is it for you that's going to make you actually respond to those myriad emails you get from Paul and
I'm also
his compadres in the PR industry?
just as a disclaimer, I am like probably notoriously bad in general at responding to emails. It's not just you. I'm really sorry. I'm really bad. I like text messages, emails. Like I'm just like, I don't know what to say.
Oh, listen, I still do a music blog, even though music blogs have been dead forever, and I never look at any of the emails people send me. So
yeah, I get overwhelmed. I don't know.
yeah.
But I guess I think for me, I'll tell you, I guess, why I became a music journalist, which, I think goes into what I look for. Like I'm just a huge fangirl. I love music and I love bands. I always have. I've always been deeply obsessed with music, and it's always been a very large part of who I am. Always really informed my inner world. Still does, but especially growing up. Um, and I think honestly for me, I always just wanted to talk to the bands I loved about their music and, kind of fan out together. And I think in that, I wanted to know more about them, about who they are, dig into what drives them, dig really deep into all of it. And I think also music can be a lens through which to look at the world, and I'm also interested in that.
Yeah.
So that being said, I don't really have as like a set of guidelines that I abide by when I'm thinking about who I want to cover. For me, and I'll echo sort of what Paul said, it's first and foremost about music that I like, music that I connect to in some way, and then of course, you know, the artist, if there's an interesting story or an interesting history, or if there's, you know, something meaningful that they're saying or that they're doing, if the music has something to say that I find important to talk about and to explore and to dig into. For me, one thing I have found myself really wanting to explore lately is anniversary stories, or speaking with artists whose work I grew up on, or, you know, people within my age group, you know, mid-30s, the millennials. For example, like, I think there can be a really interesting bridge of music, of tracing the artist's history and who they are, who they become, thinking about how it's all endured in, you know, the sort of greater context of pop culture history, or within their own legacy, what that means, and, you know, about them as a human, and, you know, whatever scene they're part of. So yeah, I love that, and that's kind of what that's the stuff that kind of, you know, piques my interest, makes me want to, you know.
Cool. So just a quick follow-up on that. As someone who went from being kind of a super fan, who was deeply passionate about music and how it kind of fed your life, when now that you're a professional and you're a writer and you hear music that you love, is it a thing where you're like, you've been sent this album, maybe you're lucky enough to get it as an advance or whatever, or do you kind of dig into the materials that someone like Paul as a PR person has sent you, or are you just off into the wilds of the internet, just kind of discover what you can find out about this artist and the music for yourself, or is it some kind of combination of the two?
Oh yeah, probably combination. Like, I heavily research,
Yeah.
heavily research. And I, you know, I want to know everything. So I read like every old interview that they've done or that I can find. I listen to a lot of the back catalog, you know, everything. One story that I did earlier this year that I think bridges all of that really well. I wrote about the 25th anniversary of Brand Van 3000's Glee. And I spoke with—
Love that article. It's so good.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. But yeah, and so, you know, obviously, like, I knew the album, I grew up with it, but, you know, I did a lot of research about sort of, you know, what was going on at that time in music, and why it did, you know, it made the impact that it did, and also the artists that were part of that collective, and, you know, sort of where they were coming from, and all of these pieces. And I spoke with James DeSalvio, who, the band leader, the head producer, who was also just a joy to speak with. He was really generous with his time and his stories, and he was wonderful. But it was really cool because, you know, it sort of, we talked for a couple hours. It was so great, and we dug into all of that, you know, the creation of the album, but of course how it offers insight into the Montreal music scene at the time in the 90s, which was, you know, kind of being defined by Anglo and Francophone culture, and, you know, how electronic music was kind of getting this playful, mainstream, experimental stride at that time, with like the Prodigy and Daft Punk, and how they kind of like were in this moment, you know. And so yeah, so there's a lot of pieces, I think, and then a lot of like depth that goes into it, which I find
Cool.
fascinating.
Nice. So just kind of looping back to you, Paul. So you're in conversation with a potential new client, you and TakeAim in general,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to suss out whether you can add value and be of service to this project and this brand or this label or their artist or whatever. What is it, especially if it's maybe a younger, less experienced label, but they just make great music, but they've got the label side of things down in terms of like finding great talent that is making great music, but they haven't really thought a lot about how to kind of package that and offer it up to the world. And obviously, if they're in competition with you, that's part of the process that they're trying to figure out. What is it what is it that you would say to, I guess this can be a conversation about what it is that you guys actually do. What is it that you could be saying to them in terms of how they should be thinking about their brand as the label, or their brand as these individual artists, as they develop the label, or their artists are developing their records? Like, how ideally, how early in the process are you getting into this, or are you letting them do their thing, or are you strategically advising them on how they should be shaping albums or their music to kind of package up to be offered into the world for release? I know that's a lot of questions all at once, but just pick out the parts that make the most sense to you.
Well, I think you know, the folks that are coming to TakeAim, there are far more no's than there are yeses for projects that are taken on, and people have to be at a certain point in their career. I'm kind of referring to this like magical point in your career, which is you know, something that you will work up to, but you know, we would want them to have some understanding of the music industry, and again, have like some realistic expectations about what it is that they're going to be investing their money in. I guess I think, you know, there are some fundamentals that artists should have in their toolkit, you know, and you would want to talk to somebody who's an excellent copywriter like Yasmin and get a bio, some sort of a really strong piece of writing about your brand, if it's your label, you know, some history or something there. If it's your biography as an artist, that's kind of traditionally one of the foundations of the campaign. And then, you know, some nice photographs, really strong visual assets are you know, really great, really fun to work with, and can add a lot to a campaign. What we can help folks do is take their creative assets and strategize, you know, a timeline for delivering those to try and harness the maximum effect of it. So does that kind of answer parts of the questions? We can help people take those creative assets and say, you know, maybe we should share this piece first. Again, if I'm working with a more established client like Domino Records, they're calling the shots and they're giving us a timeline, and we're distributing a press release and sending music out to radio stations and things like that. If it's a more of an indie client, or a client that we have a more of a collaborative relationship with, we might get into more of the discussion around timelines and things like that. But you know, that would be, I think it's important too to set boundaries, because if I was getting that in the weeds on every project, you know, at any given time I'm working on maybe 20 different projects. So I have to kind of have some parameters around the parts of the campaign that we're going to contribute to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it is interesting hearing you kind of discuss the assets and tools that you're looking for to execute on the campaign. Sounded like it was very much in the vein of like a fairly traditional classic style method of PR. I was wondering where the more digital, social media based kind of strategies or planning fits into what you guys do, or is that kind of separate agencies from what, like, you guys are kind of traditional PR, and any kind of social media strategies are not within your purview?
I mean, just to follow up on TakeAim,
Yeah.
you know, we have brought on a new person with the agency named Jess Arkand, and she is a digital strategist. So we are definitely, you know, like you need to go where people's attention is, and we all, you know, we're even consuming most of our articles and through social media platforms. So I think it is all part of the same ecosystem, and it is prudent to pay attention to it all.
Cool. Do you have any thoughts on that, Yasmin? I mean, I feel like you're kind of like the end user of some of the things that Paul's creating with his clients, but do you have any thoughts on how what's more effective as it comes through your inbox or across your desk?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on brand. I have a lot of thoughts on, I think I was thinking about brand in a more like existential way, which I'll talk about in a sec.
Sure.
But yeah, I think for me, when I'm writing a story about an artist, yeah, photos and a bio are so important. And also, maybe even like the press release of whatever, whether it's an album or a single or whatever they've got going on, along with the research that I do, it's also important to have that as like the foundation, right? So this is like the basics of what's happening. And also, yeah, also like can't stress enough how great it is to have, the Dropbox of photos, because sometimes you have to chase those down, and it can be, and it's important to have, for your story, of course. So yeah, so that's great. And it's, but yeah, for brand, I think, I feel like it can be such a weird and complicated thing, because I don't know. Is there like a right way to brand yourself? It's your story, it's
Yeah.
such an individual, deeply personal, intimate, sacred kind of a thing, and it's interesting because I feel like, especially when you're, intertwining that with the business of music, it becomes a really tricky thing for artists to navigate,
Yeah, well, I think I mean, just the advent of the internet and in particular social media, and how, I mean, so much of what drives the narrative around artists and their careers and the story around their music or just their creative lives seems to be driven by the artists themselves. Like if they're super active on Twitter or TikTok, and they'll be the catalyst for what the conversation becomes around their music, based on an Instagram post or an Instagram story or a TikTok post. And I wonder, how does that affect what you do, Paul, in terms of, do you find yourself always kind of back on your heels, like reacting to what artists are doing, or how much of that with many artists is kind of scheduled and very planned out, where it's like, oh, okay, artist X is going to drop this Instagram post on this date, and we need to be ready to react to any kind of press pickup or interest in terms of, response to it? Or how much is it like, we had no idea that was happening, and now we just have to kind of move on it in terms of reacting?
I mean, I think I feel fortunate to work with independent labels, primarily folks that are more, I think, art forward, and maybe don't pay enough attention to social media at times. But
Okay.
most of the folks I work with, I think, don't feel the pressure that a lot of artists do feel currently to, uh, well, I mean, yeah, we're asking a lot of our artists, it's like, make music, make TikToks, get out there and hustle the new album, go perform live, get on tour. It's a lot of stuff. And I think, like, yeah, I also want to touch on something too that is like authenticity. What Yasmin, I think, was maybe talking about that, like, the essence of like your brand. I mean, to me, it's like the most important part is that you are presenting, you're like showing up as, I'm getting that like authenticity of your artistry through um, your music. That's what gets me like really excited, and that is totally like, I have my own parameters for I decide, does that. But back to what we were just discussing. Sorry, bouncing all over the place here.
Oh, no,
But
go ahead.
uh, uh, there's been some dialogue about artists feeling pressure to stage these perfect moments for the release of their single. I do not work currently on projects that are that involved, and I'm personally not that interested in it. But I mean, it is happening at certain levels in the industry. But I mean, yeah, I think it's a lot to be trying to orchestrate a moment right down to the perfect TikTok for launching the campaign.
Is it, I mean, it sounds like maybe the artists that you're working with are, I don't know if a lot of that stuff is like genre specific in terms of like, there's certain genres where artists are way more engaged in using TikTok or Instagram reels or stories or whatever is the platform, or, platform of the moment. And then there's other artists who just have nothing to do with it or have no interest in it, or that they're in a genre where the fans aren't really engaged in that way. But for artists in general, do you feel like it's something where it's just like our artists that's just not how they speak to their fans? It's really through the music and traditional kind of marketing PR, and we don't try to force them to do this stuff if they're not interested, or we bring it up and we suggest it as a recommended method of trying to engage with your fans, but if they don't want to do it, we're not going to stress about it.
I think I just want to quickly add, I mean, there are artists who have to do this all themselves. and
Yeah,
and then there are artists that have a tremendous team that is working with them and can help them produce this content.
right.
And there's such a huge spectrum there. So I don't want to say that it's particular like one way or another. But I think, if you're an independent artist, yeah, doing the social media on top of everything else can feel really stressful. and
Right.
and like trying to figure out like, what am I going to tweet about, or how am I going to be personable on TikTok today? Can really take it out of some folks. So just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make, that I think a lot of new artists, emerging artists, like they see the gold standard being these superstars that are having these moments on social media, and they think that's the standard that they need to kind of be reaching for, and they don't realize that, yeah, probably a lot of those artists have like significant teams on labels, agencies, brand, some brand all their 2 cents in, and putting this content together, or designing these campaigns. So I think it's really important for people to realize that, it's not necessarily possible for you to kind of replicate what they're doing as an independent or new artist.
Yeah. I also, I want to add, speaking of authenticity, I think especially around, conversation with TikTok has been such a big topic of conversation with a lot of artists lately. How a lot of them have felt pressure to engage in
Yeah.
marketing because like it's cool and trending right now. And it can be a great tool. A lot of young artists are being discovered on there and sharing the music, and that's really wonderful and exciting. But it has to be authentic. If it's something that the artist is into and they would do on their own, like I feel like, yes, go for it. But if it's not, I don't know if they shouldn't. I don't know if they should feel like they have to jump on a trend that they don't feel comfortable with, or maybe even be embarrassed by, because it's really not them. And trends come and go, but things on the internet live on forever now. And chasing trends doesn't always lead to longevity. So I think it really depends on the artists and how they want to engage with social media in a way that feels authentic, and how comfortable they are with it, and also reflects their work that they're putting out in the world, despite what's trending.
Sure. Sorry to kind of stick on the internet social media thing for so long, because I know that's not the entire story, but it is a large part of like how people consume music and how people consume culture and learn about new music and new artists. And I think it's interesting, especially for you, Paul, where you're not a PR specialist that is like taking on projects for whatever 3 to 6 months, and then when the album cycle is done, you're off it. Like a lot of your clients they're all part of like on retainer essentially. So I don't know how that breaks down in terms of how you focus on individual artists, but with the cultures as it is now, where everything's just kind of always on, there's always something kind of coming down someone's feed. How does that affect the marketing and the kind of developing of an artist from a PR artist development perspective, from the publicity side of things, when traditionally it was always kind of built around tours or album releases, but essentially an artist can always be on, even if they're not on cycle for an album or about to go out on tour. Does that affect how you do your work or not? I'm curious how that's affected things.
I mean, the campaigns now all have a strong social media component. And I think even, independent artists are trying to, if they're trying to engage with a publicist, they're also maybe trying to run some social media ads and, cut up some clips from their music videos that they can put on TikTok, making sure that the music is not only being pushed to the digital streaming platforms, but it's also being pushed to some of these other social media platforms that support music. So, I mean, that has since I started working with Kim last year, that is the way that it is. But I think it's important context, like Kim, I'm talking about Kim, the director and founder of TakeAim Media. When she started 20 years ago, she was cutting physical clippings out of magazines. She was putting CDs in the physical mail. All of these things now we do through email. And
Right.
So the change in the last 20 years alone in the music industry, I mean, has been breakneck, and it's going to keep on changing. I think you have to be willing to engage with the to some extent with the trends and with the ways that people are consuming the music, and also get comfortable with the fact that every 5 years there's going to be some like revolution in the way that we engage with music, and that's part of what makes it exciting, I think, and part of what like gets me out of bed in the morning. It's cool. I mean, the downside to some of this is like kind of a systemic devaluation of music through streaming becoming the only way that we listen to music now. Paying $10 a month for all of the songs in the world is rather cheap, I think. And when we learn about what some artists are making, it is kind of, and then we're also like, well, get out there and do more TikToks, okay, and you'll get more streams, and it's like this, this hamster wheel that can be, really challenging. So, forget what the question was, but I'll get off my soapbox now.
Sorry, I was on mute. No, I think that's you make a really important point. The question I was asking was in terms of, like we're in a world where, it is this hamster wheel, and the kind of revenue or the return on artistic creativity is becoming diminished because of the nature of the platforms that we're all kind of discovering and consuming music from. The original question was just in terms of like how do you kind of manage the process of an artist putting out their music now. I mean, we've just come off a pandemic where for a lot of it, artists couldn't even really go tour. So that part was out of the equation. And the album release, like, there's no kind of minimal physical revenue to be made from commercial sales. It's really all about streaming at this point. So how do artists overcome these obstacles? How do they surmount this? Is the question.
You bring in a publicist who you try and like build a good team, and have the right supports in place. And I mean, I don't think it's like, artists. I've had the privilege of working with artists for a long time, and where art meets economics, there's often a lot of tension and distress
Mhm.
for artists. And one of the ways to work through that is to bring on people who are like a communication expert who can focus on those details and nerd out on those things so that you can focus on your craft. And so I think like, I think it's like kind of for the independent artists, they have to try and do it all and work a full-time job. For the folks who are at a level where they can, afford a publicist, or they're working with a label who has a budget for publicity, I think it hopefully takes a load off of their minds, because they have that support. So that is kind of my recommendation. Like, find good help if you can.
Sure. Yasmin, coming back to you. I mean, we were talking offline before the panel started about how there's, the number of outlets has gotten smaller and smaller over the years. I guess a lot of it's gone digital, but in terms of like the dailies or the weekly newspapers and the art sections have gotten quite a bit smaller. And I mean, you're in the trenches of this more so than I am, but I would imagine like getting coverage in traditional media or the digital equivalents thereof in today's marketplace is harder and harder. What is it that you need from artists and from labels and from PR firms to kind of pitch stories and reviews and coverage of artists within that smaller and smaller amount of real estate within these media platforms?
I mean, I think also sort of, I think what we were talking about earlier before we started recording, uh, to have all the assets, that's great. To have the press release that is, telling you exactly, the main points of what you need to know. Also, I think, and this would be on me, also, I guess, from the publicist as well to help inform it, but I think a really well written pitch, because especially with so many digital outlets now, there's a lot of freelancers. And so, it's competitive, right? So you have to be able to get a good pitch out there to get the attention of the editor that you are reaching out to or want to write the story for that outlet, And so, yeah, I think it comes down to also, knowing what you want to talk about, like knowing the kind of story that you want to tell and having a, very good angled pitch to present. And having that kind of intention there, I think, is one thing that can kind of get you through the weeds, so to speak.
Right. So when you say no, having a good pitch, is that you crafting a pitch to give to your editor, or the label or PR agency having a good pitch that you can say, like, there's a really interesting angle on this artist or this story or the story behind the release of this album that I think we need to be covering? Where's the pitch of it all coming from? Is that from you or from them?
Oh yeah, I think from both. I think it
From
starts
both.
with, for sure it would
Yeah.
start with, the publicist emailing me. I mean, obviously, and I'm sure obviously a lot of most other journalists I'm sure do the same, but you're aware of what's going on,
Mhm.
with the artists that you follow, or in the greater scheme of, the music world. You're keeping up with what's happening. But also it's wonderful to get, a great, thorough, angled pitch from a publicist like Paul, who, is like, hey, this is going on. This is really interesting. Maybe something that I don't know, or something that is a little bit deeper that goes beyond, my just keeping up with what's happening, and then I can take that and I do a little bit of research on my own and try to find, something cool that adds like a little bit of context to that great point, and then you put it together and
Yeah.
to the world.
Can I just say a couple of things? Can I
Yeah,
add
of course.
to that? When you were talking, I want to give a practical example of a pitch related to
I was going to ask, so you're
something that I
timing.
sent, but that when you were talking, Yasmin, about the Brand Van 3000 piece, and like I saw your face like light up about, because it was fun. I could tell like it was fun for you to work on that, and it also came across in the writing, and just like that is the magic. Like that's, in my opinion, what like makes it all worthwhile. And I think I saw on your end, like, the like feeling that you're trying to elicit in people when you are marketing music. And it's those kind of like magic moments where fan meets star, or is able to like talk about their life story through this music that was meaningful. I mean, that just gets me so excited. So when I read that piece, I was working with an artist who actually intersected with Brand Van, and so I sent you an email and I was like, hey, that was a cool piece, and you should check out this music. And you didn't hit me back, but that was just an example of like, I'm like, you make these connections one person at a time. Yasmin and I have never met before. There's no reason for you to answer an email of mine. I mean, I'm just like, hey-o. So you like make these connections one person at a time, gradually. And, that is also part of like being a publicist, is getting out there and networking and trying to meet as many people as possible, and like actually make some sort of meaningful connection so that that person is going to hit you back at some point in time. But I just wanted to go back to like that example, because that article meant something to me, because I am a child of the 90s. So
thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you. And I think for me too, like I really hope that comes across in my writing. I think, I try to, like, I'm writing as also, I mean, obviously I'm coming from a thoughtful and critical point as well, but, I try to, I'm also coming at from a fan, and I'm interested and I'm curious and I'm, excited about it. And I'm, that's why I love to dig deep into that stuff, so I'm glad that comes through. Thank you.
And then, touching on like the current landscape in Canadian music journalism. Yeah, I mean, I came on the scene. I worked as a publicist previously, and that's actually how I met Kim. And we intersected on some other projects. And yeah, I mean, when I came on the scene and got TakeAim's list and started working with Kim and Susan O'Grady, it was rather bleak, them informing me of how many people had, just moved on from journalism, people who had gotten laid off, people who, I mean, everybody went through their own unique time, but yeah, a lot of changeover in the music industry in general, and journalism and music journalism both took a really big hit. And it's so important to the musical ecosystem. And so I think it's very important that we you know, nurture it however we
Absolutely.
can. We need more writers. We need more. I mean, we need more people who want to be journalists, and then maybe be, sinister publicists in the future. But there need to be more, more journalists, because there's not enough people, uh, or outlets necessarily, to cover all of the really amazing things that are happening right now. And especially right now, it's starting to rebound, but it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking saying no to something that you really want to work on, but there's like, that it's going to be really difficult to help that artist at this given time with their particular kind of music. And I hope that we can, really build back strong from this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as we were saying offline earlier, like I think that's why community papers are really important, because that is an outlet to lift up your local artists, no matter, what they're creating, that's the space for it. And it adds such rich value to your community and to the local culture. And, I feel, especially in Vancouver, at least, I can speak for here because I live here. It's like it's really missing, it's yeah, it's something that is, I think, really important. Um, and so yeah, I hope that these things start to resurge again, because it's very valuable to like ourselves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I think we're coming close to the to our time, but I mean, I think you guys kind of touched this brand van conversation, kind of really struck a chord with me, because I think it kind of is, representative of kind of that magic that still is evident in talking about music, and kind of reflecting and writing about music that touches our hearts. Like we've come out of this pandemic, and the one thing I think most people would agree on is that the arts saved a lot of people from a mental health kind of point of view, like listening to music and discovering new artists, watching a bunch of television that if we were all going to offices every day and going to work every day, people wouldn't have been able to discover. And I think people are kind of discovering, like, oh yeah, the arts are actually really, really important. And it would be nice if kind of the media landscape kind of reflected that in terms of championing and supporting it. But given that we are where we are, and artists are fighting a million other artists, and there's a million kind of platforms out there that are a challenge even for professional PR people to kind of surmount. Maybe we could just kind of end on a positive note of advice for artists out there who maybe don't have the financial wherewithal or the kind of career development status yet, that working with a TakeAim is not on the cards, or Yasmin that they're not big enough an artist that Yasmin can kind of pitch them for an article at her outlets. What is an artist like that? What should they be doing to continue to build their career as they work on music, and build their career, or build the building blocks to get their career launched? What words of advice would you have for them, if
Uh,
any?
can't you were talking about community papers, Yasmin. Community radio, campus and community radio, is where all the freaks and heads hang out. And I've been a volunteer at CJSW for 15, coming on 16 years. Um, Campus and community radio has connected me with so many amazing opportunities, and opportunities to develop my skills and reach out to labels and fan out on people. So, yeah, I mean, there's probably a station near you, so go look them up, and get involved in your community, and just like you have to love what you're doing, and not be, placing like, these really high measures of success on yourself. Like, I think just trying to be as authentically involved in your community, and find those community supports, like, you will incrementally head in the right direction, and then you'll look back and be like, whoa, So yeah, I'm a big fan of the campus and community radio, the local papers like grassroots journalism, music journalists. Yeah, they're good people.
Yeah, I will echo that. I think really to just keep at it and stay true to what you're doing and to be authentic with yourself and to love what you're doing and to be deeply obsessed with it, like, you know, music lovers, like we all are. Because I think, as you were talking about, community is so important. And I think in that, storytelling is deeply important, you know, and it's inherent, and we're all human and we all have stories. And I think it is part of the human experience, and creative work really highlights that. And it's so important to nurture that. And I think, you know, especially for an artist, that is the thing that really connects the artist and the audience in a deep and meaningful way and lets you into their world. And it's this, you know, energy exchange, and it's powerful. So, and I think that's everything, you know. So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think to just to stay true and to love it and to, you know, connect. Yeah.
Absolutely. I cannot think of a more perfect note than that to end on. So I want to thank Paul Brooks and Yasmin Shemesh for being a part of today's panel, Cultivating the Artistic Story, which is a part of the Music Calgary Sound Off Summit's Back on Track series. So thank you to Paul and Yasmin once again. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you. It was
All
really
right.
fun.
Awesome.